I think straight here. Should we let my office know that I'm here? And also, I marked up the files in my bag, so you can bring those. Hi, how are you? Good. Who do we have online here?
So we have about 23 representatives who are participating. Some of them are here, they come in person, and some of them are online. They are our stakeholders in the exercise that we do for the calculation of the rankings.
Okay.
And they're all representative of central government ministries and departments, and also representatives from Prasar Bharati.
This is the representative from WIPO, is it?
Yes, sir. We have a representative from WIPO, sir. That's Dr. Sasha Vincent,
Okay.
who is the co-editor of the Global Innovation Index.
Right.
And since there is a strong correlation between the Global Innovation Index and the India Innovation Index,
Right.
we requested him to join, and he'll also be making a short presentation, so about 10 minutes.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And he has been very supportive for all our initiatives here in India, sir. And we work very closely with him because our aim is also to continue rising up on the GWI rankings.
Right. Okay. So are we waiting for a kickoff, or can we start?
So Dr. Saraswati is yet to join, but I think since both of you are here, so we'll start. He'll join.
Okay.
Is that okay, sir?
I think so. Yeah. It's a crowded day certainly for you.
So should I start? Good morning to everyone. A very warm welcome to the Vice Chairman Niti Aayog, to the Chief Executive Officer Niti Aayog, and Dr. V.K. Saraswat, member SNT Niti Aayog will join shortly. To all the representatives from the various stakeholder ministries and departments who are present in this room, and some of them have already joined us online. A warm welcome to Dr. Sasha Vincent, who is the co-editor of the Global Innovation Index, and he has very kindly agreed to join this launch of the India Innovation Index 2021. And on our request, he's also agreed to make a short 10-minute presentation, bringing out the correlation between the Global Innovation Index and regional index like those of India, which we call the India Innovation Index. And a big welcome, of course, to all our colleagues from the Niti Aayog. We have Dr. Rajiv Kumar Sen sitting here. We have our DMO colleagues, Dr. Chintan Vaishnav is here, and all colleagues from the S&T vertical. And so, most importantly, Dr. Amit Kapoor, who is our knowledge partner, and he is the chair of the India Competitiveness Index, and he is also supported by his colleagues here who are present. They are sitting behind, and of course, Indrani is welcome to you as well. So, with these words, I'll just pass on the floor to the CEO to kindly start with his opening remarks. Thank you, sir.
So, thank you very much, Vice Chairman, senior colleagues, our colleagues from ministries. Welcome to the colleague from Geneva, from Switzerland, and everyone else, if they are state governments as well, online. So this is an important, very important initiative. We're going to get the sort of global angle on this as well, soon in a presentation. But as we all know, there are some very rapid transitions happening globally. The climate crisis, the economic story, the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. So that's at a global level, but it has its impact nationally as well. And this particular initiative, I think, is quite important when you're looking at the overall growth story nationally of India, where innovation is going to play a very important role in driving inclusive growth. And I think the NITI team, I've joined, just a week ago, but from my sort of preliminary understanding, the NITI team together with the Institute of Competitiveness, I think they have really worked with all of you, the ministries, the state governments, I think in a very inclusive manner to come out with this innovation index, which the Honorable Vice Chairman will be releasing shortly. But let me just take you through. There's excellent work going on in all states. And my sense is from the briefing I got, this was quite a close, it was quite competitive. And we have an index. We have in the major states category, Karnataka is number 1. Telangana is the runner-up. And in Karnataka in particular, I think the human capital story of innovation in that human capital, the whole system there and the approach they're taking. Schools with ICT labs increased from 29% to 46%. And the pupil-teacher ratio at the tertiary level was 15:1. So, that's obviously of a very high standard. They've also attracted investments. FDI inflow has been good. And there's also been a focus. I think traditionally Karnataka has led on focus on R&D. And then Telangana also, a strong human capital story, a healthy business environment, and again, the focus on R&D. I'm just reading out the sort of the people, the states which have performed well, along with others. Manipur has topped in the northeastern and hilly states category. So again, focused investment, healthy business environment. Chandigarh has come first in the union territories category and the city states category, where there's been good knowledge diffusion and output, high-tech exports over 45%. So again, these are just some of the examples. I think overall, if you look at the index, which will be released shortly, I think almost everyone has performed very well. And I think this is all part of our sort of collaborative and competitive approach to federalism. I think all the states are making a major contribution towards that goal we have of, achieving a sort of significant economic growth over, the coming period. So I'd like to stop there and, request the VC perhaps to say a few words. So who's coming? Sorry, member Dr. Saraswat will come in. Thank you.
Good morning. All of you know that innovation is the key for sustainable and inclusive growth. I think our direction is right. It certainly can help us solve the biggest challenges of our times, bringing millions of people out of poverty, generating livelihood opportunities, and paving the way for Atmanirbhar Bharat. That is what we really look forward to. India has been focusing on building a culture of innovation. In fact, Honorable Prime Minister, right from 2015 when he came in power, 2014 onwards, gave a major push to the innovation ecosystem of the country. And as a result, Atal Innovation Mission was set up in the NITI Aayog, which has played a major stellar role in empowering children in schools with Atal Tinkering Labs, universities recognizing the power of entrepreneurship and provide critical support through incubation and expertise. That is what has happened. And every sector of the industry has today made it a point to collaborate with startups and innovative entrepreneurs. The results which have been brought out today speak for themselves. We are now home to the world's one of the largest startup ecosystem, ranging from unmanned drones in defense, data-led decision-making in agriculture. India today has almost about 750 R&D centers which are run by multinational companies. Huge success of these R&D centers in outsourcing innovation to their parent companies is evident, and Indians have shown great aptitude and skill for innovation. In fact, if these MNCs are given the required environment and ecosystem, India really can become a global hub for innovation. I firmly believe that Indian Innovation Index can play a crucial role in materializing this dream. We have been refining this index since its launch. After consultations with various distinguished experts and in-house research, we have increased the number of indicators from 36 to 66. This will certainly give us a much more nuanced view on how states have been performing and make sure that development in the states is well rounded and not concentrated on a few sectors. Yet again, proving the law of accelerating returns, that is the tendency for advances to feed on themselves and increasing the rate of further advance. Karnataka, as CEO was mentioning, had maintained the top position last year. Manipur and Chandigarh, the leaders in their respective categories, have shown significant improvements since last year by investing more in ICT labs across the schools, more investment in private R&D and increasing PhD enrollments. We certainly feel that any growth is not going to be lasting if it does not take into account the less. I want to encourage all states to ensure that these innovations are also accessible to all and help in resolving societal challenges. Only when we all grow together we can become a prosperous nation. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the stakeholders who are involved in preparation of this report, especially our knowledge partner Institute for Competitiveness. I hope the third edition further instills a competitive spirit among the states, UTs, and enables them to boost the innovation ecosystem in the country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. So, with your permission, we have a short presentation bringing out the various facets of the India Innovation Index, comparing it with the last year's index and also talking about the way forward. So, with your permission, sir, just start this. Yeah. So as the member just said, this is the third in the series of India Innovation Indices that we have brought out. The first was in 2019, released in October 2019. The second was in 2021, although it was for the year 2020, was brought out in January 2021. And this index is now brought out for the year 2021. We are doing it a little late, but the reason for that will come out in the slides that we will now see. Yeah, so just a brief background of what we are doing by way of bringing out this index every year for the past 3 years. The objective of the India Innovation Index, as we have just heard from the CEO and the member, is to scrutinize the innovation capacities and the performance of all the Indian states, the Indian UTs, and for the ease of comparison and making the comparison very just, we have divided the country into 3 categories. The first category is major states, where there are 17 states. The next is the category called northeastern and hill states, where we have 10 states and UTs. And the third category is city states like Chandigarh and Delhi and even Pondicherry, which have their own assemblies, but for all practical purposes, they are considered to be cities. So, as I was just saying, the first and the second edition have managed to guide and support the policymakers in bringing out policies for improving their local innovation ecosystem. Now, we incidentally are also ranked fairly high on the Global Innovation Index, and India has gradually improved since 2015 from position 81 at that time to now position 46 in 2021. And to bring out the correlation, as I had said in my initial remarks, we have Dr. Sasha Wunsch-Vincent from the Global Innovation, from the World Intellectual Property Organization, who is the co-editor of the GII, who will also talk to us in a little while. Now, just to recap, the India Innovation Index of 2020, which was released in January 2021, we had 5 enabler pillars and 2 performance pillars there. That framework has been retained this time as well. The only change we have done is we had been suggested earlier within NITI Aayog by our peers and also by the Global Innovation Index to try and match our indicators to those of the global index. And the Global Innovation Index has 80 indicators until last year, and we used to have 36 until last year. So we have, through a laborious process done jointly by the knowledge partner and by the NITI Aayog, increased over a period of 1 year our indicators from 36 to 66. Now, while the number 30 may not sound very big, but it was a humongous effort that was involved, because getting data from the states and making them understand what exactly is required from them took its own time. But the states had been very cooperative, and data did come in over a period of time. But that resulted in the short delay of about 5 months. We should have released the index in January of 2022, but then the data collection took a lot of time. And finally, we have now been able to, with the cooperation of all stakeholders, we are bringing the index out today. Now, now the future index, which will be for the calendar year 2022, the present calendar year, which we will bring out in January of 23, we are targeting to add 19 more indicators. So we should come to the magical figure of 85, and which will be obviously comparable to the 80 of the GII, for which we already have data from 18 states. Now, we had tried very hard to get data from other states as well, but that didn't happen. So we thought we will make a clean cut at 66 numbers of indicators and then bring out the index instead of waiting indefinitely. But the good news is 18 states have already responded to us for all 85 indicators, and the balance, I'm sure we're already on the job. We should be able to collect by the end of the current calendar year. Now, as I just said, the framework of the Indian Nation Index has been more or less static for the past 3 years. There are 5 enabling pillars and 2 performance pillars. Now, human capital, the investment, knowledge workers, business environment, and finally safety and legal environment constitute the enabler pillars, and knowledge output and knowledge diffusion constitute the performance pillars. And let me also add here that this framework is that way pretty in line with the Global Innovation Index framework, which also talks about similar pillars and a similar way of calculating the index. So the ratio of the enablers versus the performance brings out the innovation efficiency, which finally brings us to numerical scores for enabling the ranking of the states and the UTs. Now, this explains each pillar, but of course, I don't want to go into that for paucity of time. But human capital, of course, is amongst the most important. Investment plays a big role in enabling innovation, of course. Knowledge workers, business environment, and safety and legal environment complete the picture. Knowledge output and knowledge diffusion are the performance pillars, which actually make it possible for us to calculate quantitatively the innovative capabilities of a given state or UT. Now, the next few slides just capture in a short form, what are the new indicators that we have added. So the column number 3 talks about old, new. So old would mean that that was indicator that was already there in the GII of 2020, which was brought out in January 2021. And new means that this is a new indicator we have added, which has been added only this year. This year would mean last year, to calculate the rankings for the year 2021. So as I was saying, there is a total of 66 indicators now in the current index. And these are the various indicators that we have listed in these 3 slides. Now, I'll do a short round robin with Dr. Amit Kapoor. He will talk about the next 3 slides, which constitute the methodology by which the index has been prepared and the states and UTs have been ranked. So, off to you.
Thank you, Neeraj. Very quickly, in terms of identification of indicators, what we had done was we clearly looked at the Global Innovation Index and tried to see how we were able to map it. As Dr. Saraswati was saying, initially making a remark, that it is about mapping and seeing how India can actually improve and how we are able to push it to global standards. So this was the driving idea in terms of identification of indicators. And of course, the collection of data was a fairly humongous exercise, and of course, it took us a little over 12 months this time over. There was a pandemic situation and things, but then at the end of the day, we are now able to get insights into states which are far deeper than the previous index. There's a very clear categorization of states that have happened, because if you really look at it from a spatial point of view, we cannot compare Maharashtra with, say, another smaller state or a northeast state. or we cannot compare it to hilly states. So because Maharashtra would behave very differently from an innovation perspective than if you really compare it to say Chandigarh or whatever. So we have done a very clear categorization of states, and that makes the index very robust and gives us far deeper insights. This also helps us in really pushing forward in terms of really giving policy solutions as well if we do the right categorization. And then, of course, the idea was to really look at the analysis and computation. This time over, what we have done is we have made a little change over the last year. What we have started doing for calculating scores is that we have started looking at the world's best as the parameter or as the thing that we have to look at. So the utopias are the world's best. So what we are trying to, you might see a certain change in scores, but that is because we are comparing India to the world's best outcomes that we are actually seeing across different sets of countries. And this was something that we saw within the World Intellectual Property Organization's index as well. So it really helps us in really achieving or comparing as to how we are really performing across the world. We followed a very robust methodology in terms of understanding as to how the alpha and the KMO values are really stacking up, because we wanted to see how the data works together. We do not want to look at indicators that don't work together or they don't answer the question that we are really seeking to get insights into. So this was what was done, but that was more from the perspective of getting the robustness of methodology. So what we are really proud of this time over is that the methodology is very robust. Compared ourselves to the global mapping, and it also paves the way for really setting up the tone for how states can actually create a much robust policy moving forward. Neeraj, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Kapoor. So now just to capture the rankings of the India Nation Index 2021. So this slide shows the three categories: major states, northeastern and hill states, and union territories and city states. So as we can see, Karnataka with a score of 18.01 ranks number 1, and it has retained its ranking. Karnataka was number 1 in the India Innovation Index of 2020 as well. Telangana has moved several places up. It was number 4, and now it is number 2 in the rankings for the current index. It was number 4 in the last index. And of course, in the northeastern and hill states also we see a change. Himachal Pradesh used to be number 1 until last year. This time it is number 5. Manipur was number 3, and now it has occupied number 1, which is a very glad tiding, because now we see the northeastern state among the hilly state. This time the northeastern state has taken the lead, and Manipur is number 1 with an overall score of 19.37. And finally, in the third category, Chandigarh is number 1 and Delhi is number 2. It was vice versa the last year. And just to explain these rankings a little more, the next few slides talk about the average scores that the entire country had across all states and UTs for the 5 enabler pillars and the 2 performance pillars. So starting with human capital, the average pillar score was 25.60, and the highest scoring states and UTs were Pondicherry, Mizoram, Chandigarh, Tamil Nadu and Himachal Pradesh. Now, the key learning that we take from this is that in the overall ranking, human capital obviously is one of the highest performing pillar, and this score is 25.60, I just said. And in some states, we are failing to retain our human capital, as is evident from the ranking that we did. And this obviously impedes their innovative growth trajectory, since the quality of human capital plays a major role in innovation. Now, the next pillar is investment. Now, this has an average pillar score of 6.26. It is not very high, and obviously investment should increase several fold for innovation to increase proportionately. Now, as we can see that there are contrasting scores for various states and UTs. Karnataka has a score of 19.06, and it has been the top performer for investment. And the other states which are high performing in investment are Arunachal Pradesh, Manipur, Delhi and Uttarakhand. Now coming to knowledge workers, again the average score for the country is 5.68. The high performing states and UTs here are Chandigarh, Delhi, Manipur, Himachal and Goa in that order. And obviously for India to make a transition towards a knowledge-based economy, it is crucial that we focus on knowledge workers. And obviously this will continue to play a key role in improving our innovation capabilities. Business environment has a very good score of 28.13. In fact, amongst the 4 pillars we spoke about just now, this is the highest. And the high performing states here are Uttar Pradesh, Delhi, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, and Tamil Nadu in that order. Safety and legal environment has the highest score, and that's in a way a very encouraging thing that we are able to provide a safe and a pretty solid environment for businesses and innovation to take over. Here the average pillar score for the country is 31.84. It is the highest among the 5 pillars I just spoke about. And Manipur, Meghalaya, Andaman and Nicobar Islands, Nagaland and Chandigarh are the highest scorers in that order. Now coming to the last 2, but more importantly the output pillar that we talk about, the knowledge output pillar has a score of 13.44, and what we inferred from the index was that there is a comparatively higher score in the economically prosperous southern and western states, such as Maharashtra, Karnataka, Telangana and Tamil Nadu. And these states have shown a high performance in all enabler scores, especially in knowledge output. And the result has obviously shown in knowledge output. And the highest performing states here are Chandigarh, Karnataka, Telangana, Tamil Nadu and Uttar Pradesh in that order. And the second performance pillar, that is knowledge diffusion, has an average pillar score of 5.81. And here what we can see is Karnataka, Telangana and Delhi are amongst the highest scoring. And most of these major states, which is Karnataka, Telangana, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu and UP, have scored above the national average. The national average is 5.81 and these states have scored above the national average. And these states have a very high share of information and communication technology exports and also high-tech exports and citations. So hence the knowledge diffusion score of these states is higher than the rest of the country. So that completes the 7 pillars and the average scores that the country has obtained for each of the 7 pillars. I'll just pass on the next few slides to Dr. Amit Kapoor, who will talk about the drivers for innovation.
Thank you, Neeraj. Just wanted to share one very important thing, that this year we did a very unique analysis in terms of understanding what is the distance to frontier. What we were trying to do is that how far are we from to the world's best. So this was a unique analysis, and this was again to really see how fast states are moving towards the frontier. And we got some very, very powerful insights. What we have really seen is that of course there are certain gaps that exist, but India has really moved forward in terms of catching to the frontier, and that's a very, very positive thing over the last few years, especially the last period that we really looked at the aggregated data. What we find is that India is one of the most improved countries in terms of moving towards the frontier, and there are of course states which do better there, but quite interestingly, Karnataka is the state which has improved the maximum over the last year itself. We actually compared the data for 2019 to 2021, and we see that there is this unique movement that is happening. Telangana is the second most improved and Haryana the third most improved. So you will see it in the scores. This is available online as well. And when we see from the northeast and hilly states, you will see that Manipur, Uttarakhand, in that order, they are the most improved states. Chandigarh has improved significantly. Now the gap between the best and and what we are achieving here has actually reduced quite significantly. So if you really look at the world's best possible, 100, Karnataka has really moved towards the frontier very, very closely. So that's a very unique and powerful thing that we are seeing here. The next thing that we wanted to really see was the efficiency of innovation in terms of like how outcomes and inputs are really performing. And this is where you will find that states, there is the right thing that you're actually seeing in terms of the upper right quadrant. These are the states which are performing significantly well. These are the states which we find would eventually be the hotspots for innovation. And there is a very clear evidence that it is already happening. Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Telangana, Karnataka, they have the ecosystem there to really push the innovation forward. So this was the efficiency, and then of course we wanted to really bracket or try to really see as to how innovation scores and efficiency scores really stack up. And you would also see that yes, wherever innovation efficiency is high, the innovation index scores would actually be highly correlated. and that is the performance levels that we are seeing. So what I really see here is that India is moving significantly forward with the whole idea of innovation. From my point of view, and this is an academic view, not a Niti view, but in the next 10 to 15 years, we could end up being one of the most innovative locations in the world if we are actually maintaining this trajectory that we have seen over the last 3 years while working on the index. Over to you.
Kapoor. So now we come to the final slide, and here we have tried to call out the learnings and the recommendations from the exercise that we did over the past almost 1.5 years to bring out the India Innovation Index of 2021. The first learning is that the gross expenditure in R&D needs to considerably improve, and it should touch the 2% of the GDP mark as early as possible for us to realize the Prime Minister's dream of converting India into a $5 trillion economy in the coming years. The second learning is that states and UTs have performed very well in the human capital pillar. And India, of course, is that way, rich as far as human capital is concerned, but somehow the knowledge worker pillar, which is related, has not done so well. So we need to invest in our knowledge workers by bringing out as many skill and refresher training programs as possible, by ensuring that the skilling and the reskilling of workers at all levels continues to happen and at an accelerated pace. The third learning is that for intangible assets like patents and trademarks to create spillovers in the economy, commercialization is vital. And it is important for us to encourage more startups to file patents across India and to convert those patents to products and products to market capturers. So that is the way we look at the trajectory which any R&D should adopt. Currently, we are able to develop and demonstrate products up to the pilot scale, maybe up to the demonstration scale, but for the product to actually reach the market, there is another journey that is to be covered, and that is very, very vital. The fourth learning is that the role of the private sector in research and development in India has been less than what we would desire, much less than what we would desire. And according to rough estimates, more than 55% of India's R&D expenditure comes from the government sector. And there has to be a point where the private sector takes over the government sector as far as R&D expenditure is concerned. Now, if we draw lessons from the leading economies of the world, particularly US, Germany, and South Korea, we say that while public expenditure has always been there in those countries as well, but growth has always followed a very positive trajectory once the private sector has started investing in R&D and consequently in commercialization and bringing products to not only their domestic but also to the global market. Finally, India needs to undertake efforts in creative goods and services, which has been ignored for some time. So with these words and with these learnings, we look forward to fostering, as we say, competitive and cooperative federalism amongst the various states and UTs in India, which will ultimately, obviously, lead to national development on all fronts. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your patience. Thank you so much. So with these words, I will request the Vice Chairman and the member and the CEO to kindly release the India Innovation Index. We have copies there. No, they've got it.
Goodness me.
Backdrop.
How would you like? We have a backdrop here, sir. We can bring it. It is outside.
Yes.
Thanks.
No, but they'll have to change the camera.
Wow, this is a
Oh, thank you.
telephone book.
Open it, I suppose. Are you ready for us?
Yeah.
They're back.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
He proposed to also share his experiences while doing the entire exercise of collecting the data and calculating the rankings and doing it jointly with the NITI Aayog. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amiji, Vice Chairman, would like to say a few words because I believe you are
Would I then be excused at the end? May I make my comments now?
Sir, yeah, if you would like to do it now, sir.
Actually, I'm very keen to hear what the WIPO presentation
So then
is.
should we ask him to present, sir?
Yeah,
Should we ask him to present and then you can sum up? Sir?
yes.
Dr. Vincent?
Yes, Mr. Singh.
Can you hear me? Yeah, hi.
Very well.
Welcome once again on behalf of the NITI Aayog to this release of the India Innovation Index 2021. You have been a sterling partner as far as India is concerned in its journey on both the India Innovation Index and the Global Innovation Index. And as we all know, you are also the co-editor of the Global Innovation Index. And sir, we have been able to conduct 2 workshops with the Global Innovation Index in the past 6 months, where he has played a key role. He has been the main resource person. So after you, Dr. Shashank Vincent, for your remarks on the correlation between the GII, that is the Global Innovation Index, and our India Innovation Index. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and a big welcome and also greetings to Delhi from Geneva. I'd like to recognize Mr. Berry, the Vice Chairman of NITI Aayog, and also his kind willingness to hear the WIPO presentation before he departs, as well as Mr. Iyer, the CEO of NITI Aayog, Dr. Saraswat, Mr. Kapoor, and of course, a warm welcome to India and all its states, which have been ranked today, I think 28 states and the union territories. So first of all, I'd like to congratulate you to the launch of the India Innovation Index, and also to Karnataka for achieving the #1 slot. I think it's relatively impressive as well how you pushed the analysis this year far beyond just the rankings. We just had a presentation which talked about the efficiency ratios and also the quest to push various states to the frontier in terms of your measurement exercises. So this is extremely impressive, and I will get back to it in a minute again. So it gives, of course, us a great pleasure to attend. We're extremely honored at WIPO to also be the only participant or the international participant in your launch event. I think this speaks great volumes about the extent of our collaboration, the relationship that we have formed for measuring innovation capacity and benchmarking India and its subnational territories over time. And this is really since 2011. This is quite a personal story for me as well, because, when I left the OECD in Paris to come over to WIPO in 2011, there was really only one country at my side, over many, many years. And this was really India, with the support first of the Department for Promotion of Industry and Trade, the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, and of course, the late Mr. Prasad, Naresh Prasad, who has left us 2 years ago. NITI Aayog at that time was not our main partner, but it was indeed the Department for Promotion of Industry and International Trade. But as Mr. Saraswat mentioned, since 2015, since day one of Prime Minister Modi's appointment and election, the GII and India collaboration has been a #1 priority for the Prime Minister's office as well, and NITI Aayog. In fact, that year, was the last year, if I might remember, where India went down in the GII, which created quite some concern with the Prime Minister's office in 2015 at the time. But of course, we then reminded the Prime Minister's office that that decline in performance is most likely a reflection of past years and previous years, right? And since 2015, there has been an upward trajectory for India in the GII as well. And I take it very personally that it's, in fact, Prime Minister Modi himself, but also Mr. Amitabh Kant and Minister Goyal, who made it like a top government priority to follow what is going on at the level of the GII. So I think, it's fair to say that probably the best GII experts are not in Geneva anymore, but they are actually in Delhi by now, because the way you have engaged with the GII is relatively impressive. I also want to take note of the fact that you've broken down the barriers between innovation and intellectual property as well. In many countries still, innovation is considered on the one hand, and intellectual property as something technical on the other hand. And as the presentation that we just heard underlined, in particular in the III, you also pay great tribute to the commercialization of intellectual property and how to unlock the potential that India has. And the potential is obviously huge, right? So India has, on intellectual property, also moved away from a defensive state of thinking of IP to a much more embracive and collaborative one over the last 10 years. So this journey has been, relatively impressive. So if we manage together to turn around the potential, innovative potential, into intellectual property potential together, that's a huge chance, not only for India, but also to the world. Having traveled, of course, to India on GII business and OECD business at least twice a year, every year for the last 20 years, I know the extent of which, of innovation capacity, which is in the bone of every Indian down to the village level, right? So I'm keen for the world to uncover and benefit from this innovation potential in the subsequent years. Then, of course, came the idea of the India Innovation Index. And the idea is quite profound, right? It's not just to have another index. We have enough indices in the world as it is, but it's really to marry, as Mr. Singh just said, competition and collaboration, right? So, it's a healthy dose of pressure, of course. We know that given that it's a top level priority, I'm sure the states are quite anxious to hear what's happened to their rank. And so I think there is some competition there and some pressure. But I think there is also some degree of collaboration and deep understanding that measuring leads to monitoring over time and also to improvement. And these two things go really hand in hand, and this is what is important. In that sense, it's actually the only regional innovation index in the world that gets this sort of attention internationally, but also at the government level, right? So I have been involved in many regional innovation indices, but I think the III is the only one that has this top level priority for the government, and that it also is so synced to the Global Innovation Index. And I think this year you've made an additional effort to align it with the GII, and we will of course try to honor this alignment, but also we will learn, this is not a one-way street, we will try to learn from you as well, right? Because as you all know, we don't detain the ultimate wisdom of how to measure innovation, right? This is a very complicated thing, and I really dream of the day when India can show us how to measure frugal innovation, grassroots innovation in a much more improved way relative also to the GII, right? So that will be the day also we will start to further align with the III and not only the other way around. I know that many other countries are trying to emulate the III as we speak, and this is a testament to the quality of your work. And let me also say that in the process, you know, there's been a lot of deep friendships and relationships on the professional level that I formed with NITI Aayog colleagues. So let me conclude here. When we publish, and the GII launch is going to be on September 29, and I invite bookmark your calendars. I'm sure a big launch event on September 30 or the week after. If you agree, I think I certainly don't have bad news for India on September 29, 2022. So when we publish this is obviously always only the start, right? All of us who are involved in indices, and as Mr. Singh pointed out, Mr. Saraswat, today is not the end for the state level innovation, right? It's just the start to further ignite and liberate innovation potential. So let's really start this, and let's also allow me to thank India for having shared this journey with me since 2011 and with WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization. And I would like to thank Mr. Berry again for staying with us for this time, and also my deepest regards to the Prime Minister's office and also Mr. Amitabh Kant, who's really been an important peer to our work here in Geneva. Back to Delhi, and many thanks again.
Not only regionally, but globally as well. So with these words, I will request the Vice Chairman to kindly enlighten us with his words on the event. Thank you.
My esteemed colleague, Dr. Saraswat, CEO, Dr. Sasha Wunsch-Vincent, colleagues from ministries, from the media, Dr. Amit Kapoor, and of course, colleagues at NITI, most especially those who have worked with with Neeraj on the production of, as CEO said, this telephone book. I had no idea of the enormity of the resulting publication. I'm obviously, I share in the referred pride of what has been produced before my arrival, CEO's arrival, and thank you, Dr. Sasha, for acknowledging the contribution made by Amitabh Kant to this whole exercise. And thank you also for sharing your own journey and giving us, a sense of the origins of this body of work, as well as being so generous about where it stands in a global landscape. And that was very much the reason I stayed back, because I hope to get some insight into that, and I was not disappointed. I'll just make a few points as an economist, but I think to some extent you have anticipated it, Dr. Sasha, by talking about, innovation being in the air in an Adam Smith kind of sense in India, and therefore the importance of trying to capture and codify that. But speaking as an economist, I would make a couple of points on the concept of innovation, and then come to what this might mean in the particular environment of India states. So I think I'm right in saying that institutionalized innovation is and innovation as an activity in which governments take a policy interest is really a post-Second War kind of phenomenon. I mean, before that, there were individual inventors, and they were very productive, and in many ways, the inventions that transformed our lives in the 19th century were very important, but they weren't institutionalized. Today, I think the way economists see innovation, it is the source of what we call total factor productivity. That basically, yes, you can exploit, you can add to resources, you can add to your human capital, you can add to your physical capital, but ultimately rising living standards depend on increases in productivity, and that requires innovation, new ways of doing things. So that's really the relevance in some ways of what we're trying to capture here. Now, what we have here is rather schematic, which is to say, what are the abstract elements that go into an innovation culture, and what are some of the markers and metrics of the outcomes of innovation. But I think the real issue for India is what are the incentives, channels, motivations for making sure that innovation is applied to the major problems facing the country. And I don't know, I'll have to read the book to see if one gets a flavor of that. To give the opposite example, we have a very dynamic IT industry in Bangalore, Karnataka, but until recently, it's been remarkable for really being outward faced. It's only relatively recently that it started to be applied to the problems of the very deep and severe problems of India, but of course, and a lot of that with government coaxing. We had a launch here yesterday on digital banking and the payment system. So those are now practical applications of IT to improve people's lives in India. The short point I'm making is that an innovation culture helps in national economic development if there are mechanisms to apply to the problems of the country. And it's not clear to me that faster delivery of groceries ranks amongst the highest priorities for the nation, although that is what's rewarded by private equity investors. Again, as I peruse the volume, I'd also like to get a flavor for what is meant by innovation in the following sense. I mean, a takeaway for me, I mean, Dr. Saraswat, my colleague, of course, is very knowledgeable about government-sponsored research, which is fundamental and is the most important part of research according to the report. And I totally agree with Neeraj that there needs to be much more investment by our corporate sector. But I think a big lesson for me about the diffusion of mobile telephony in India was that a lot of the hardware and the technology came from outside, but what it took to democratize mobile telephony was business process innovation. So, and I do think as India, with the rest of the world, confronts the challenge of climate change, for example, we will look elsewhere for path-breaking innovation, the rich countries who have the resources, the US, Germany, etc. But then the question of, as you put it, Dr. Sasha, the frugal innovation to get the stuff out at the right cost levels. I mean, I do hope that that kind of innovation is adequately captured by our innovation index, because that is really the way in which the innovation ecosystem will improve people's lives. And so I think in NITI we need to have a watching brief on the extent to which we can identify such opportunities. Two final points, if I may. One is you've already made the point, which is an important one, about what an innovation ecosystem does in terms of transforming attitudes towards intellectual property rights. And I think India is very much in that transition at the moment, and that's what you would expect. It would become even more so as patenting becomes a more important expression of innovation. But I would also request my colleagues in the Atal mission, in the science and technology vertical, to help India think collectively about what more we can do about the link between universities and innovation, which has become a very important part of the innovation ecosystem in most of the G7 countries. And my perhaps final point, because I've probably spoken too long, is what we should learn from the city territories of Chandigarh and Delhi. They are in their own sphere, in their own ranking, rightly so, because it makes very little sense to lump together apples and oranges. But it also says to me that the hubs of innovation are most likely to be cities, and we may be obscuring that by focusing on states as the unit of analysis. So, maybe on a domestic basis for us to look at the innovation culture in cities over and above the states might help us get even more granular about what might be done to foster an innovation culture. So my compliments again for those who have stuck with this journey for this long. I think it's very good to know that this is now, considered an internationally recognized and respectable exercise. I would particularly like to thank the Institute for Competitiveness and Amit for including, as it were, some of the robustness tests in the methodology, because I think since NITI depends so much on indices, it's very important that we be aware of the robustness tests in the indices, and I'm hoping that we can generalize that from what you've done here to the many other indices that we do. So my thanks to all those who are online also, and to my colleagues. And with your permission, may I now excuse myself?
Thank you so much, sir. And a big thank you on behalf of the entire NITI Aayog, on behalf of everyone present here, for having chaired this session, sir, and for having spent your time. And just to focus on one part of your closing remarks, innovation in cities was recognized by us also during our discussion with the knowledge partner. And this volume that you have in front of you has a small chapter on innovations, cities as innovation hubs. So it is yours, sir. We are calling it innovation in cities. So we will elaborate on this a lot more in the index that we bring out in the next year.
Okay, well, there was some intuition. Without reading the book, I knew it was there.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you so much, sir. And a big thank you to everyone present here, especially the members from the media and
Sorry,
Dr. Vincent.
Amit, I didn't mean to cut you out because you were meant to wear. Yeah. Right, thank you.
See you one of the days.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the Thank you so much for being here, and a big thank you to all colleagues who are here and those who have joined online. Thank you for joining us. And a big thank you to the members from the media as well. Thank you.